The 19th century obsession with history, as described by Foucault, has not fully been replaced by a spatialization of thought and experience. An essentially historical epistemology continues to pervade the critical consciousness of modern social theory, understanding the world primarily through the dynamics arising from the emplacement of social being and becoming in the interpretive context of time. This enduring epistemological presence has preserved a privileged place for the historical imagination in defining the nature of critical insight and interpretation. As we move closer to the end of 20th century, Foucault's premonitory observations on the emergence of an epoch of space assume a more reasonable cast. The material and intellectual context of modern critical social theory have begun to shift dramatically, with calls for a far reaching spatialization of the critical imagination. A distinctively postmodern and critical human geography is taking shape, reasserting the interpretive significance of in the historically privileged confines of contemporary critical thought. New possibilities are being generated from this creative coming line, such as a simultaneously historical and geographical materialism, a triple dialectic of space, time, and social being, and a transformative re-theorization of the relations between history, geography, and modernity. Postmodern critical human geography emerged in the late 1960s but was largely ignored due to the reaffirmation of history over geography in Western Marxism and liberal social science. Wright Mills's sociological imagination provides a basis for spatializing the historical narrative and reinterpreting critical social theory. Mills argues that the sociological imagination is rooted in historical rationality, a concept that applies to critical social science and Marxism. He argues that individuals can understand their own experiences and fate by locating themselves within their period and becoming more aware of the chances of all individuals in their circumstances. The sociological imagination is to grasp history and biography and their relations within society. Recognizing this task and promise is the mark of a classic social analyst. The historical imagination, as described by Edward Soja, is a central aspect of critical social theory. It reduces meaning and action to the temporal constitution and experience of social being. This rationality is grounded in the intersections of history, biography, and society and is shared by all social theories. The historical imagination is never completely spaceless. It's always time and history that provide the primary variable containers in these geographies. Critical social theory has been particularly central to the search for practical understanding of the world as a means of emancipation versus maintenance of the status quo. The development of critical social theory has revolved around the assertion of a mutable history against perspectives and practices that mystify the changeability of the world. The critical historical discourse sets itself against abstract and trans-historical universalizations, naturalisms, positivisms, religious and ideological fatalisms, and any conceptualizations of the world that frees the frangibility of time, the possibility of breaking and remaking history. Historicalism has been conventionally defined in several ways, including neutral, deliberate, and hostile. However, this definition identifies historicism as an overdeveloped historical contextualization of social life and social theory that actively submerges and peripheralizes the geographical or spatial imagination. This definition does not deny the extraordinary power and the importance of historiography as a mode of emancipatory insight, but identifies historicism with the creation of a critical silence, an implicit subordination of space to time that obscures geographical interpretations of the changeability of the social world. World. Michel Foucault's contributions to critical human geography can be traced back to his historical insights, particularly in his lectures and interviews. He introduced the concept of heterotopias as the characteristic spaces of the modern world, moving away from the hierarchical answers of the Middle Ages and the enveloping space of emplacement opened up by Galileo. Foucault emphasized the importance of an external space, the lived and socially produced space of sites and their relations. These heterogeneous spaces are constituted in every society, but take varied forms and change over time. He identified many such sites such as the cemetery, church, theater, garden, museum, library, fairground, barracks, prison, Moslem hammam, Scandinavian sauna, brothel, and colony. Foucault contrasts the fundamentally unreal spaces of utopias, which present society in either a perfected form or turned upside down. The heterotopia can juxtapose in a single real place several incompatible spaces, either creating a space of illusion or creating a space that is other, as perfect as ours is messy and ill conceived. Foucault's work argues against historicism and prevailing treatments of space in human sciences. He proposes a heterogeneous and relational space of heterotopias, which is neither a substanceless void nor a repository of physical forms. Foucault's innovative interpretation of space and time is influenced by structuralism, a critical orientation that connects space and time in new and revealing ways. Structuralism aims to establish an ensemble of relations that make elements appear juxtaposed, set off against one another. This synchronic configuration is the spatialization of history, the making of history entwined with the social production of space. Foucault's spatialization of history was provocatively spatialized from the very start, opening up history to an interpretive geography. He emphasizes the centrality of space to the critical eye, especially regarding the contemporary moment. In an interview, Foucault reminiscences about his exploration of other spaces and enraged reactions it engendered from those he once identified as the pious descendants of time. He believes that space is fundamental in any form of communal life and any exercise of power. Foucault's exploration of the fatal intersection of time with space in his writings is a reflection of his post historicist and postmodern critical human geography. He was a historian who never abandoned his allegiance to the master identity in critical thought. Foucault had to admit the geography was always at the heart of his concerns, and this realization appeared in an interview with the editors of the French Journal of Radical Geography, Herodote. Foucault's argument takes a new turn, questioning the origins of the devaluation of space that has prevailed for generations. He takes an integrative rather than deconstructive path, holding on to his history but adding the crucial nexus of the linkage between space, knowledge, and power. For those who confuse history with the old schemas of evolution, living continuity, organic development, the progress of consciousness, or the project of existence, the use of spatial terms seems to have an air of an anti-history. Foucault's spatializing description of the discursive realities gives way to the analysis of related effects of power. In his work, The Eye of Power, he restates his ecumenical project, stating that a whole history remains to be written of spaces, which would also be the history of powers, from the great strategies of geopolitics to the little tactics of the habitat. Foucault postpones a direct critique of historicism with an acute lapse, maintaining his spatializing project while preserving his historical stance. Berman's book, All That Is Solid Melts into Air, The Experience of Modernity, explores the reconfigurations of social life in capitalism over the past 400 years. He defines modernity as a mode of vital experience encompassing time, space, history, geography, sequence, and simultaneity. Modernity is comprised of both context and conjuncture, reflecting the specific and changing meanings of space, time, and being. Berman's work serves reinforcing debates on history and geography in critical social theory and defining the context and conjuncture of postmodernity. The spatial order of human existence arises from the social production of space, while the temporal order is concretized in the making of history. The social order of being in the world revolves around the constitution of society, the production and reproduction of social relations, institutions, and practices. The experience of modernity is shaped by the changing culture of time and space that took place around 1880 to the outbreak of World War I. Technological innovations and independent cultural developments created new modes of thinking about and experiencing time and space, leading to a transformation of life and thought dimensions. This expanded fin day cycle saw industrial capitalism survive its predicted demise through rational and spatial restructuring, intensifying production relations and divisions of labor. An altered culture of time and space emerged, restructuring historical geography and introducing ambitious new visions for the future. Both Findecycle periods resonate with transformative socio-spatial processes, with the complex and conflictual dialogue between urgent socio-economic modernization sparked by system-wide crises affecting contemporary capitalist societies and a responsive cultural and political modernism aiming to make sense of material change control over their future directions. Modernization is a continuous process of societal restructuring that is periodically accelerated to produce a significant recomposition of space, time, being in their concrete forms. For the past 400 years, these dynamics have been predominantly capitalist, as has the nature and experience of modernity during that time. Modernization is unevenly developed across time and space, inscribes different historical geographies across different regional social formations, and has become systematically synchronic, affecting all predominantly capitalist societies simultaneously. The last half of the 20th century has followed a similar trajectory, with a prolonged period after the Second World War and an ongoing crisis filled era of attempted modernization and restructuring taking us forward the